Hello and welcome back to the Field Service News podcast. My name is Kris Oldland and I'm the editor of Field Service News, and I'm joined today by Noventum's Nick Frank. Nick, good to have you on board.
Good to be here.
So the conversation today, we're looking at drivers for growth. The question of how to grow profitability is quite high on the strategic agenda of most service companies, but actually only few are able to realise this. Some businesses are struggling to maintain their existing revenue and profit margins, let alone trying to achieve ambitious growth rates. Yet, on the same hand, there are other organisations that are exhibiting very, very healthy growth rates. Now, Nick and his colleagues at Noventum have recently done some research on this very topic. So Nick's going to be talking to us about why this disparity exists. But Nick, perhaps if you could just introduce yourself and the team at Noventum. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do.
Yeah, my name's Nick Frank. I'm a specialist in the development and execution of service strategies that increase the value of manufacturing technology businesses. And I guess I've worked on major transformations in the fastener business, the capital equipment business, developing proactive service businesses. And more recently, working as a consultant, I've worked on a number of projects with Noventum. Now, Noventum are pretty unique in terms of they're a consulting business, but they do specialize. We specialize really in the area of strategic service management. And really, as a business, we all have a passion, and that is we all see that the service business really leads the way to abundant and sustainable growth for pretty well all businesses. And really, our mission is to unlock the we believe unlimited potential that many service business organizations have. And we do this through various services, but basically a well-proven service business model and a transformation roadmap. That's really what Noventum is really all about.
Okay, brilliant. And so the research that you guys have just conducted, I mean, what was the motivation behind the research, and what were your objectives?
Well, it's interesting, we talk to a lot of senior managers about their business challenges.
Yeah.
And it's very noticeable that, especially in the last 5 years, many businesses have been struggling to really grow their revenues and profits, let alone achieve the growth rates that are required by their shareholders. And this is really something that we hear a lot. And our previous research had been very much focused on the service element, the service challenges.
Yeah.
And we started to think, well, actually, we should take a much more holistic viewpoint. Let's look at what are the key drivers to business growth, and then how does service really relate to that? So really the objectives we set ourselves was to do exactly that. Understand what are today's and tomorrow's key drivers for profitable growth. Mm-hmm. And then what role does services play in respect to those key drivers?
Okay, and what was the methodology that you were using? Because it's always important to understand that when looking at any piece of research.
Well, yeah. First of all, we really sat and talked with a lot of people. We sat and talked with about 51 board members, senior managers in businesses to really explore the subject and explore really what are the key issues that they faced, and started to draw some basic conclusions from that. We then sent an electronic survey, which we had about 132 senior service managers and directors, really answering a whole series of questions, which really validated a lot of our findings and gave us some real statistical data.
Yeah.
And then finally, we talked to a further 28 of the managers that we talked to, all of whom were really at the board level, to really, if you like, validate the findings and really enrich the whole service, the whole research process, and get a few stories and make sure that it really was sound.
Sure. And what were the kind of companies? Obviously, there were service companies, but was there a specific vertical you were targeting, or what were the companies that were taking part in this research?
Well, they were a very broad range of companies. I wouldn't say they were all service businesses. Okay. They were manufacturing, technology, service businesses, but really a full range. But most of them, 81% of them, were in fact within the B2B environment, and the vast majority were international.
Okay.
And the industries they covered were really very, very diverse. The key lumps, if you like, were IT, healthcare, manufacturing, and automotive. But there were many, many other industry sectors represented. And the size of the company went from really quite small. The SMEs were about 34% of the participants, to global enterprises, which represented over 30% of the participants. So we really had a very wide and diverse range of companies and size and types of companies. And when we looked at the companies and we looked at their growth rates, it was quite interesting to see that maybe only 20% of those companies had actually achieved more than 11% growth rate for the years 2010, 11, right, and 12. Yeah. And that's how we really define. That's how we define growth, is over a time period. What was the revenue growth and what was the margin growth? And those are the two factors that we used to define growth over a 3-year time period.
Okay, and so what were the key findings that you guys found then?
Well, what we found was very noticeable, is that amongst the successful companies, what we see is that they didn't see service and service challenges as being like standalone. They really saw service as being a fundamental business solution to the company's growth objectives. So they really, service was really part of a key strategic lever in that the companies were using in order to gain overall business growth. And what we saw was that the really successful companies really had really 4 key attributes. Okay. That they pursued a wide range of growth strategies. They innovated for customer value. They all exhibited and talked about organizational agility. And they also all really talked about and emphasized the importance of strategic alignment between the service strategy and the overall corporate strategy.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting kind of across the whole 4. But can I take you back one step to look at the first of those drivers? To pursue a wide range of growth strategies. What do you mean by that? Can you define that a little bit clearer for me?
Yeah, what we did is when we had the initial interviews with the managers, the 58 managers, directors, what we identified was that it appeared to be that there were 5 sort of generic growth drivers which were being employed by companies. So companies were following a product expansion policy in mature markets or product expansion in emerging markets. And many, now pretty well 90% of them, also had a policy of following a growth strategy of product-related services. Right. So that's where we've got things like preventive maintenance, these kind of contract spare parts, and growing this part of the business. But we also found 2 others, which was that there were companies also following integrated solutions. And this is where a company puts together a service and a product to solve a specific business problem. So an example of a solution, integrated solution, might be a company like Michelin, who sell tires by the kilometer. Okay. So basically, they're providing a solution, a service solution, which involves a service and a whole set of managed services that keep the tires on the road, but also the product itself. Yes. Yep. And then the 5th driver we saw was that companies who were really looking to expand their customer business related services. So these are really the services aimed at the customer's internal processes, and often it takes the form of outsourcing, taking on the value chain of the customer. Managed services would be another good example. So that's what we saw. We saw these that companies generically were following these 5 different growth strategies.
What about mergers and acquisitions?
Well, yeah, originally we saw that as being a driver, but as we got more and more into it, we realized that actually mergers and acquisitions is really more of a tactic to achieve growth than a specific growth driver in its own right.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, what conclusions did you draw then from having a look at these growth drivers?
Well, this is really the interesting part. Is what we found was that, I mean, nearly all the companies focused on growing their business in either mature markets or emerging markets, or through product services expansion. And I guess that's of no real surprise. These are very common traditional strategies that are being employed by pretty well all companies. But more significantly, there were fewer companies, but they were there, were actually starting to focus on advanced services. So these are the integrated solutions that we're talking about, and customer business related services. And what was really very interesting was that companies who deployed between either 4 or 5 of these different strategies statistically had higher growth rates.
Right. Okay.
So, and this is very important. It starts to say that if you're really going to be successful, then you've got to go beyond first 3, which are much more the traditional strategies, and you really start to have to focus on your customers' business problems and services.
Okay. That kind of brings me back to my next question, actually, which you mentioned in the second finding was innovating for customer value. So, again, what can you define that a little bit more? Can you clarify what you meant by that?
Well, like I was just saying, that the companies that were the most successful in driving growth were those that employed all 5 drivers. And as I was also saying, that the key differentiator with these drivers, the advanced services, integrated solutions, and customer business related services. And to be successful in these companies really exhibited and demonstrated to us that they took what we would call an outside-in mindset.
Okay.
They really looked at the customer's processes, the customer's business problem, and the kind of value that their customers were trying to deliver to their customers, and then developed solutions to really improve the customer's business. And so what we're saying is that if you're really, really going to be successful, then you have to really innovate around this notion of customer value. And if you really do that well, then you really start to understand the priorities of your customers, and therefore the priorities for you. And that allowed these companies to actually get a better balance in the portfolio of projects they had. They didn't just concentrate on large game-changing projects, but they also had many smaller but equally valuable projects, which just went a little bit further, really provided some iterative type of process.
Okay. And I'm going to pick you up on another one, agility. I think it was your third point you mentioned, and again, how are these organisations? The more agile, the better, I'm guessing. But what do you mean from that?
Well, we saw agility as being really a capability to rapidly innovate on a continuous basis. These companies had a culture where it was natural to change and react to change. And, when you're talking about innovation, and you're talking about trying to do new things orientated around customer processes, it means that you have to do things differently. This creates internal friction and conflict. And so the companies that are successful are really used to getting over this type of friction and conflict. And so these companies definitely exhibited the kind of agility that is needed to rapidly move and implement sort of customer-focused service strategies.
Okay, and you mentioned again strategic alignment. It's something that we hear quite a bit about. Is this just a buzz phrase? What's your view?
Well, I mean, I think another problem that you hear is everyone always complains about short-term focus. Managers are driven to achieve short-term targets by the financial analysts and shareholders and many other factors. And given that often they perceive that the service revenue only impacts a small part of their business, maybe 10, 20 or 30%, then it goes into the background a little bit. It's not doesn't become a priority. Now, the thing about if you're going to be successful with service transformation, it has to be aligned with the overall corporate direction. And what we found was that those companies where they were successful in developing their service business, they in fact exhibited two particular attributes. They thought long term, but they acted short term. So they had a very clear long term vision about where they were trying to take their service business. But what they did is they made sure that each step that they took really gave a tangible and credible contribution to the overall performance of the company in the short term. And in this way, they can start to actually demonstrate to CEOs, CFOs, that the service business is actually contributing to the company, and they overcome this kind of short-term thinking process. And I think the second thing that these companies really demonstrated was that they took a company-wide view of their challenges. They didn't talk about really service independently of the corporate goals. It was really, they talked about the corporate goals and then what service was contributing. And so in this way, they were able actually to demonstrate to the C-suite the value that their particular transformations, their changes, their new revenue streams were really bringing to the business. Because often, actually, what they found was that that they might make a change which might not actually apparently be so significant. The service revenues might not be so significant, but then there was a lot of other stuff happening. For example, there can be significant product pull-through, which has a pretty major impact on the overall company revenues and margins.
It's this traditional issue that we have of services almost being siloed, and I think it's those companies that are leading the way, like you've referenced, are the ones that don't see service as just this one siloed operation, but like you say, something that can pull through to the product elements as well. Earlier on, it seemed to me that you were saying that advanced services was a big differentiator in these growth drivers.
That's right, and the advanced services definitely were a differentiator. So we're talking here about companies that are already starting to look at integrated solutions, and companies that are looking at customer orientated solutions around their customers' business processes. And the companies who developed these type of propositions absolutely statistically had higher growth rates.
Yeah. It makes sense, we still don't see it quite in practice. But what were the challenges of implementing these advanced services?
Well, it was interesting that there were two key challenges that people brought up, and really the first was around service sales. The intangible nature of service and service sales when you're trying to demonstrate value within a customer's business. It's not like selling a product where the value is quite clear. You're selling something that's very much intangible, and a lot of these businesses had found it very difficult to get their sales force on side and find people who have the ability to articulate this. And then on the other side, I think that many were also struggled with service delivery, and in particular, the challenge of creating scalable and consistent service solutions. It's one thing doing a managed service for one client, but when you start to broaden out to 2, 3, 5, 10, and then you start to look at different geographical regions, you can start to very rapidly, if you really haven't standardized your processes, what you can find is actually the end deliverable of these services can be very, very different. And also the efficiency with which the service is delivered can vary dramatically. And this has a major impact on A, your ability to deliver, in other words, your ability to grow the revenue, and B, on your profitability.
Yeah. And so if you were to summarise the findings, put you on the spot here, Nick, what would be your executive summary?
Well, what I would say is that it's quite clear that there's no silver bullet. There's no single strategy which is really a clear winner. But there is very strong evidence from this research study, which is that those who master a wide variety of the growth strategy, especially including those that are focused on solving customer business problems, are much more likely to achieve higher growth rates.
Sure.
And that these companies who achieve this definitely exhibit an outside-in approach. So they're really looking to innovate around customer value. And that in order to do that, these companies are often exhibit the features of a very agile organization, able to adapt to new processes and successfully implement change. And finally, I think that what we see is that for advanced services to be successfully grown, they really have to be integrated into the corporate strategy. They have to be part of the corporate strategy. Yeah. Service doesn't stand to one side, and therefore you absolutely need to have good alignment between your corporate strategy and your service strategy. This is in fact a precondition for successful growth.
Okay, some fantastic insight there, and I know you'll be putting together an article on Field Service News that'll sit alongside the podcast as well, and if I'm right, our readers will be able to access your report by following the links on that as well.
That's absolutely correct, and what I would also add, Chris, is that we'll be presenting this research at the forthcoming Servitisation Conference at the Aston Business School in May, as well as we'll be having a discussion at the Service Management Expo in June. So if anyone listening to this podcast would like to know more or come along, we'll be there to discuss the research and all the challenges around growing a service business in more detail.
Fantastic.
And what I also would add actually is that this research doesn't stop here. And that if people are really interested in participating in future research, they can join Noventum's service innovation community, and again they can do that through either through LinkedIn or through our website.
Brilliant, and the website is allthews.noventum.eu, if I remember, and they can find it from there. Yep.
Yeah, that's correct.
Brilliant. Well, Nick, again, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this podcast. As always, thank you for listening in. We hope you found it as informative as we have, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.